Welcome, dear listener. Tonight, we take a quiet step back through time, into a world where hunger was not a fleeting discomfort, but a constant companion. Where food was not pleasure, but survival. As you settle in, perhaps under a heavy blanket, with only the soft sounds of the night around you, let your mind drift to the flickering hearths of medieval Europe. Imagine the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the rustle of rough wool, the low murmur of voices around a wooden table. A world where meals were simple, spare, and often disappointing. But also a world full of stories, of endurance, of ingenuity, of making do with what little the land and luck could provide. Let the past unfold slowly now, with each breath and each word, a small taste of a life long gone. And now, let's begin. The day begins not with sunlight, but with the sound of movement, soft rustling in the straw, a low cough, a distant rooster. You don't open your eyes right away. It's cold, and the air is heavy with smoke that never fully left the room overnight. Your back aches from sleeping on uneven straw, and the weight of the wool blanket, damp and rough, clings to your chest. The small fire in the hearth died hours ago. Beside you, the others are stirring. Your wife, your eldest, maybe the baby if he made it through the night without fever. But there is no time to dwell. Morning in a peasant household doesn't invite you gently. It shoves. You sit up, already reaching for yesterday's clothes, already rehearsing the next dozen tasks in your mind. Your stomach tightens, not from hunger exactly, but from knowing what will and won't be there to greet it. There's no smell of anything cooking, no sizzle, no warmth. What waits is what always waits. A small wooden bowl of pottage, left over from last night, and a crust of bread so dense and dry it might as well be a piece of wood. The pottage is thick with barley, turnip, and bits of cabbage, if any were left. You pick out a stringy root with your fingers and chew slowly. The taste is neither pleasant nor disgusting. It's just food. It fills a space but does not satisfy. No one speaks. Your wife eats quietly beside the fire, cradling the child. The others take their share, silently, without complaint. The bread is hard. You dip it into the pottage to soften it. You chew for a long time. There's a hint of sourness to it. Maybe from the flour, maybe from the air, maybe from your own mouth. But it's all you've got. You eat anyway. There is no tea, no coffee, no morning warmth in a mug. The only thing to drink is ale, thin, weak, and slightly sour. It was brewed a week ago and is nearly finished, but the water is worse. Everyone knows not to drink from the well unless you want a belly that knots itself for days. So you sip the ale, just enough to wash the bread down. It sits in your belly like stone, but that is something. Your wife offers the children the last bits of last week's cheese. It's sharp now, curling at the edges, but it's food. There will be nothing else until sundown. Breakfast is not a comfort. It is not a ritual. It is a transaction between your hunger and your survival, measured in spoonfuls and silence. Outside, the frost still clings to the thatch, and the earth is cold beneath bare feet. But there is work to do. The animals stir too. The goat bleats from its corner. The chickens rustle in the coop you nailed together last year. You'll let them out once you've eaten. Or maybe you won't. Maybe today's the day the fox has come again. The pig, if it's still alive, must be checked. You stand, your stomach now full but unsatisfied. Your limbs are slow to obey, but you push through the ache. That is what mornings are. Not beginnings, but continuations of labor, of effort, of existing from one bowl of gruel to the next. No one complains. Complaining does not put food on the table. It only wastes breath you'll need for the plow, for the woodpile, for the walk to the fields. You nod once to the others. Your wife is already sweeping the floor with her bundle of sticks. The baby whimpers and quiets again. The day has begun, and breakfast, such as it is, has ended. You don't think about flavor. Not really. Not the way someone in the future might. There is no craving for sweetness, no longing for something creamy or rich. Those are not part of your vocabulary, let alone your reality. In your world, food has one job: to fill the belly. That's it. Whether it tastes good or bad is almost beside the point. Most days, it tastes like nothing. The bread tastes like what it's made of. Barley, maybe rye, maybe ground peas if wheat was short that year. It's coarse and heavy, and it grits between your teeth from poorly ground flour. The pottage tastes like warm, wet earth with bits of boiled texture in it. Roots, maybe greens, sometimes beans, but never spice, never depth. The idea of a favorite meal is laughable. Food isn't pleasure. Food is duty. You eat what's there, not what you want. Spices, those belong to another world. A pound of nutmeg costs more than a cow. Pepper is locked in wooden chests in noble kitchens, guarded more carefully than gold. You know of these things, perhaps by rumor, or because you once smelled something strange coming from the manor house during a feast day. But they are not yours. The only spice you know is garlic, and even that only grows when the soil allows. Vinegar is more common, sour and sharp, but it wakes things up, which is better than nothing. Mustard seeds, if someone's been clever, ground into paste with a bit of stale ale. That's a rare blessing. But for the most part, your meals are a study in sameness. The same colors, the same textures, the same quiet chewing. Day in, day out. If anything has gone off a little, the vinegar helps cover it. If something smells too strong, the garlic helps distract you. Not fix it, just distract you. There's a kind of cruelty to knowing what exists, but never tasting it. The monks write about spices in their books: cinnamon, cloves, saffron. The merchants speak of them in passing, when their carts rattle through the village. You might see a flicker of yellow powder on the edge of a noble's plate as the servants carry the dishes through the gates. You smell roasted meat from afar, and for a moment you think, that's what real food must be like. But the thought fades fast. The gruel is waiting. The same bowl, the same turnips. Even salt is a luxury. It must be bought or traded for, and not everyone has access. You might get enough to preserve a cut of meat if you're lucky, but not enough to season a pot. And so everything tastes like water and old earth. Like the inside of the pot it was boiled in. Like what it is, and no more. You get used to it, in time. The absence of flavor becomes its own sort of normal. You know when something is bad, not because it tastes different, but because your body recoils. There's mold, or rot, or something foul in the broth. That's when you notice. Not when it's bland, but when it's dangerous. Otherwise, you chew and swallow and get on with it. Your children do the same. They don't ask for something better. They don't know to ask. And maybe that's for the best. To have no taste is to have no longing. To have no choice is to avoid the ache of wanting. You eat what's put in front of you, not with joy and not with disgust, just with resignation. Garlic helps, vinegar helps, but nothing changes the fact that you eat because you must. not because you want to. The idea of delight is for people with options. You live in a world without flavor, and so you survive without it. You've never tasted cinnamon. You've never seen it either, not up close, but you've heard of it. They say it smells like warmth, like festivals, like something far away and sweet. They say it colors broth like fire and makes meat taste like heaven. You don't know what heaven tastes like. You imagine it might be something like bread that doesn't scratch your throat, or meat that doesn't smell of smoke and age. But cinnamon? That's for people behind stone walls. People with cellars and servants and long tables you've never been invited to. Nutmeg, cloves, ginger, these are just words. You don't have a reason to say them, except maybe when repeating something a traveler muttered at the tavern. In your house, there is garlic if you're lucky, mustard seeds if the harvest was kind, maybe a bit of wild horseradish dug up near the riverbank. That's what flavor means here. Burn, not bloom. The rich use spices like flags, not just for taste, but for status. The more exotic, the more expensive, the more powerful they seem. You once heard a tale of a nobleman who sprinkled saffron into his bathwater, just so he could leave yellow stains on his towels as a sign of wealth. You wondered what saffron even smelled like. Was it floral? Was it bitter? Was it sharp like vinegar or soft like milk? You'll never know. But you've seen the carts. They come through twice a year. Long caravans led by men with foreign coins and guarded wagons. The innkeeper buys a pinch of something now and then, to drop into wine when a noble passes through. The smell lingers in the air for hours. You remember it because it made your stomach twitch, not with hunger, but with confusion. It was a smell your body didn't understand, like something too fine to trust. The divide is not just in wealth, but in memory. A noble child grows up knowing the taste of clove-studded pork, of honeyed almond tarts laced with cardamom. Those flavors become part of their identity, as natural to them as cold pottage is to you. They expect meals to surprise them. They expect food to mean something. To you, food means survival. Spice is never part of the equation. It's not even something you miss. It's something you were never introduced to. You cook in the same pot every day. You stir the same handful of ingredients with the same wooden spoon. You season with smoke, with salt if there is any, and maybe with vinegar to wake up whatever's gone dull. But your food never sings. It never sparkles. It never flirts with the tongue. You chew and swallow and work. They feast and boast and dream. And so spices become more than just food. They become a symbol of what you are not. They mark the line between you and them, as clearly as silk sleeves and clean fingernails. They hoard their saffron and nutmeg behind castle walls. They laugh over their cinnamon wine and sweetmeats. And you listen from outside, from across the fields, with a mouth full of bitter roots. They trade gold for flavor. You trade labor for bread. They know the world through their spice rack. You know the world through your shovel. The difference is sharp, but not flavored, and never fair. You hold the loaf in your hands and knock on it with a knuckle. The sound it makes is dull, solid, too solid. It's yesterday's bread, or the day before's, or maybe last week's. You can't tell anymore. It's coarse, rough like stone under the fingers, and it smells faintly sour. That's not unusual. Bread always smells a bit off after a few days, and bread never lasts more than a few days unless it's gone hard. This one has lasted, a little too well. You know it's been stretched. You can taste it the moment you bite in. There's something in the grain that doesn't belong there. Something bitter, gritty, almost metallic. It's not flour, not really. It might be ground up beans or barley husks, or the flour mixed with chalk or dried roots or worse. Some say sawdust, some say clay. You don't know for sure. What matters is that it fills your belly, and it doesn't kill you. That's enough. The baker in the village doesn't hide it. He looks tired like everyone else, and his oven is always burning low. He gets what he can and makes what he can. You know that if he's stretching flour, it's because flour is too dear. Grain prices rise with every bad harvest, every frost that lingers too long, every Lord's tax. A sack that once lasted a week now lasts a fortnight, but only because it's bulked out with things that should not be eaten. Still, the bread sells. It always sells. People need it. Bread is the backbone of the meal, even if the backbone is crooked. You tear off a piece, dunk it into the thin ale, and chew. It grinds between your teeth like sand. It sticks to your gums. It never feels right. But it gets you through the morning, and through the field work, and through the hunger. That's what matters. You can't be too proud when you're trying not to starve. The ale is no better. It's weak, pale, and watery. But it's safer than water. That's the truth everyone knows but doesn't say aloud. The water from the well might look clean, but everyone's seen the filth that runs down from the roads, from the chamber pots, from the animal pens. Everyone's heard the stories. Children with bloated stomachs, coughing through the night after drinking from a pail that smelled fine but held sickness. Ale, even when stretched, even when bitter, has been boiled. The brewing makes it safer, kills what the eye can't see. So you drink it, mug after mug, even if it tastes like grass and sour bread. The alewives, hard women with strong hands and sharper tongues, do what they must. They add more water to the brew, let it ferment a little less, stretch the grain a little thinner. They feed their children too. No one asks questions, not unless the taste turns foul or the bellies start cramping. Sometimes the village enforcers test the bread. Sometimes a baker is fined or shamed. But most of the time, the lords don't care. They don't eat that bread. They don't drink that ale. Their kitchens are stocked with real flour, their barrels filled with wine and strong beer. Your bread is not their bread. Your ale is not their ale. You chew another bite, jaw aching, and sip again from the mug. This is what food looks like when corners are cut, and survival is the only recipe. It fills you. It drains you. It keeps you upright, but never full. And in the quiet moments, when your belly groans and your teeth hurt, and the bread turns to paste in your mouth, you wonder what it would be like. To eat something fresh, something clean, something made without lies. But that thought is dangerous. It leads to hunger of a different kind. So you swallow and carry on. You smell it long before you see it. The sharp, greasy aroma that fills the air when meat hits flame. It's not a smell you live with. It's a smell you remember. A smell that stirs something almost ancient in your bones. Today, it's your pig. You've fed it for months with scraps and weeds, guarded it from cold, from thieves, from sickness. It was meant to last through the winter. But the baby is sick, and the last of the beans molded in the barrel. So the pig dies today. Its blood seeps into the dirt behind the house, thick and dark, as your brother works the knife and your wife prepares the boiling pot. There's no celebration, no ritual, just silence and the quiet understanding that something precious is being burned for the sake of survival. The meat will not last. Even salted and smoked, it will shrink. It will spoil. It will disappear. But for a few days, there will be fat on the lips and protein in the belly. For a few days, there will be strength. It's not something you do lightly. Most families can't afford to keep livestock just to eat them. A cow gives milk. A hen lays eggs. A pig eats waste and becomes a kind of walking storage, a bank of future calories, guarded jealously. Killing it is like breaking a savings jar you can't refill. But hunger is cruel. It makes the impossible necessary. You eat the meat, you save the bones, you render the fat, and you keep the hide if it's any good. Nothing is wasted, but nothing replaces it either. And once it's gone, the silence that follows is deeper than before. A kitchen that once rattled with the snorting of a pig now only echoes. You know you won't taste meat again for months, maybe a year, maybe never if the spring goes badly. So you chew each piece slowly. You suck the marrow from the bones and let the broth linger on your tongue, knowing it might be the last time. There are other ways to get meat, but they are not safe. The woods beyond the fields belong to the Lord. The deer, the rabbits, even the birds, they're His. His forests, His game, His punishment. Poaching is a word everyone knows, and everyone pretends not to say. If you're caught with a snare, it's a fine. If you're caught with a bow, it might be worse. If you kill a deer and someone sees and the wrong person talks, it could be the end of everything. But still, people do it. You've done it. Once. You set a trap for a hare and waited through the night, hidden in the underbrush, ears straining for every sound. When you found it in the morning, still warm and twitching, your hands trembled. You carried it home like treasure, like guilt. The meat was stringy, the bones small, but it was meat, and the children smiled for the first time in days. Sometimes you dream of it, of a roasted bird with skin crackling in firelight, of stew so thick it coats the spoon, of meat that doesn't come with fear. But then you wake to dry bread and cold pottage, and the dreams taste bitter. In truth, meat is not food to you. It is something else entirely. It is danger. It is grief. It is a decision with weight and consequences. Every bite means something died, something valuable, something irreplaceable. And so you chew in silence. You hide the bones. You thank no one. Because in your world, when meat appears, it is not a gift. It is a loss. And sometimes it is the beginning of trouble, or the end. The cellar smells like damp stone and old salt. The air is cold, but not clean. It carries the sour weight of decay, controlled, intentional, but never hidden. You open the crooked door and step down carefully, ducking beneath the low wooden beams, watching for rats. The lantern flickers. The shelves along the walls sag beneath hanging bundles, jars, and sacks. Hooks from the ceiling hold what remains of the smoked meats, shriveled links of sausage, gray slabs of pork curled inward, ribs so dry they look like they'll snap if touched. This is what survival looks like when the frost comes. Not warmth, not comfort, but prevention. Food doesn't stay fresh. It just stays barely edible. You run your fingers along the coarse crust of salt on a barrel lid, then lift it. Inside what used to be fish lies hidden under brine so strong it stings your eyes. You slam the lid closed. The fish is not for taste. It's for winter. You didn't grow up expecting flavor from the cellar. You were taught to expect permanence. Smoked meat lasts weeks. Dried fruit, if you ever see it, lasts longer. Everything else must be layered in salt or vinegar, or tied and hung until it becomes something less than what it was. Cabbage becomes sour and pale in a ceramic jar. Apples are sliced thin, laid on cloth, and dried to leather in the last days of autumn sun. Nothing is bright. Nothing is fresh. The food down here is hard, chewy, sinewy. It breaks teeth before it breaks hunger. And it must last. Not just days, not just weeks, but months. Through snow, through sickness, through silence. You calculate it constantly, measuring each mouth against each bundle. You wonder if you've made enough, preserved enough, guessed enough. One mistake in October means an empty table in February, and no one forgives that kind of mistake. Not the stomach, and not the child who cries through the night. Preserving food is labor you feel in your hands. The salting takes hours, rubbing coarse grains into flesh until it's tight and pale. Smoking takes days, watching the fire, keeping it low, letting the heat kiss but not cook. Drying means slicing, turning, covering, checking for flies. Pickling means boiling vinegar, not choking on the fumes, sealing jars with wax that never quite holds. Every step smells wrong. Nothing sweet, nothing gentle. Your clothes carry it. Your hair carries it. When you sleep, your hands still feel the shape of things that no longer resemble food. But this is the only way. You have no cold box, no cellar that freezes, only stone walls and dark corners. And time. Time is what makes this food last, and what makes it worse. By midwinter, every bite is a bite of memory. You chew and try not to remember what it used to be. You try not to long for something green, something soft, something that grew in the light. Upstairs, the children ask what's for supper. You lie and say it's stew. It's always stew. The truth is, it's a mixture of whatever's left. A piece of dried pork, a handful of shriveled beans, a cut of onion that's started to turn. You soak it, boil it, spice it with whatever vinegar is left. Then you serve it in silence. The cellar below creaks as the wind shifts outside, and you wonder how many more days it will last, how many more meals you can pull from wood and salt and hope. Preservation is not a craft. It is a warning. It says, this will not last. This will not be enough. And yet, for now, it is all you have. And so you chew through another mouthful of sour, leathery meat and thank no one. Only the cold. Only the stone. Only the taste of what used to be food. You bite down, and all you taste is salt. Not the bright kind that makes food sing, but the thick, dead kind that coats your tongue and lingers at the back of your throat. The fish is gray, leathery, and curls at the edges like paper left too close to a fire. It takes effort to chew and more effort to swallow. This is dinner. It's always dinner. Not because you love it, but because you need it. Salted fish lasts. It fills the gaps when nothing else does. A few scraps of pickled onion, a crust of bread, and a wedge of herring pulled from the bottom of a barrel. That's a full meal in winter. You don't complain. You can't afford to. The alternative is nothing at all. So you scrape off what white crystals you can and try to convince your stomach that this is nourishment, not punishment. Eel is common if you live near the marshes. It's easy to catch if you know how, and doesn't spoil too quickly. But it's not fresh, not really. It's smoked until blackened, twisted like rope, stored for weeks or even months. When you cook it, the fat rises in thick globs and the flesh splits unevenly. Children dislike the texture. Some adults do too. But no one refuses it. Cod is better if you can get it, especially from the sea, but it rarely comes cheap. Most cod arrives dry and white, hard as wood. You have to soak it for hours before it becomes anything like food. Even then, it doesn't flake the way it should. It crumbles. It fights the knife. And always, there is the salt. It's in the flesh, in the skin, in the broth. It covers everything. You can't escape it. After eating, you feel thirst deep in your bones. And clean water is not a luxury you often have. You've heard of fresh fish, of course. Fish that glisten, that smell like wind and water, not like barrels and brine. But those belong elsewhere, to the manors, the monasteries, the estates with still ponds stocked like larders. You've seen one once hauled from the water and served on a silver tray, its eyes still clear. It smelled soft, alive. The nobles laughed and poked at it, deciding whether to roast it whole or boil it in wine. You don't remember what they chose. You remember the smell. It wasn't sharp. It wasn't sour. It was gentle. That's the word. You never tasted it. You stood at the edge of the kitchen, holding a bucket, pretending not to stare. Later that night, someone tossed the bones out behind the kitchen wall. You picked them clean in the dark. The skin still had flavor. It tasted like something from another life. Most days, your fish comes from the market, stacked in barrels, packed in layers of coarse salt, buzzing with flies if the lid's been left too long. You buy what you can, rinse it in sour ale or vinegar, and boil it until it falls apart. The smell fills the room, not in a good way. It clings to your clothes, your hair, the walls. You learn not to notice. You learn to smile when the children wrinkle their noses. You tell them it's good for strength, that sailors live on this, that monks thrive on it. You don't tell them what it really is. A last line of defense between you and hunger. A preserved ghost of something that once swam, something once alive, something that once might have tasted like the sea. But here, now, it tastes only like salt and thyme. And you eat every scrap of it, because you must, because it's all there is. You bend down in the morning mist, fingers already stiff from cold, and begin pulling at the dirt. The ground is hard, not frozen yet, but close. You loosen the soil with a stick, then dig with your hands, working around the base of a small cabbage. It's half rotted on one side, but it'll do. You cut away the blackened leaves with a dull knife and slip it into your basket beside 2 tired onions and a soft carrot. This is what you've grown. This is what you'll eat. If you hadn't planted it, if the rain hadn't come when it did, if the bugs had been worse, you'd have nothing. You know people who had nothing. They're thinning soup with bark and boiling nettles. You'll do the same in a few weeks, when these last scraps run out. But for now, you hold on to the idea of vegetables, green things, rooted things, reminders of the summer that's long gone. There's no market stall with fresh produce year-round, no cellar bursting with squash and beans and sweet corn. That's a fantasy. That's for places with more sun, more wealth, or more monks. You have a small patch behind your home, maybe a few rows beside the path. You fight for every sprout. The rabbits want them. The birds want them. The mold and frost want them too. And when they do grow, when the beans stretch upward or the cabbage heads curl tight, you feel something close to pride. But it doesn't last. You can't afford to keep anything long enough to admire it. You pull it from the ground and put it in the pot. No seasoning, no oil, just boiling water and time. By the time it reaches your bowl, it's limp and pale and barely holds together. Still, it's nourishment. Not warmth, not joy, but something your body understands. Spring is the cruelest season. That's when you expect things to grow, but the ground is still too cold. The roots haven't woken yet. The barrels are nearly empty, and the pickled things are slick and sour and nearly gone. This is when children cry most, when bellies bloat and cheeks grow hollow. A single onion can change the flavor of the whole week's meals. A wild garlic bulb found near the path feels like a gift from God. You chop it fine and mix it with what little barley remains, and the family eats in silence. No one speaks of the hunger anymore. It's woven into the rhythm of the year. In summer, there is color. In autumn, there is plenty. In winter, there is salt. But in spring, there is only memory. Memory of peas and leeks and soft green tops, pulled from the earth with bare hands and a racing heart. You've heard stories of noble gardens, long, orderly rows, tall walls to keep out wind and pests, servants to weed and water. You picture apples in baskets, artichokes trimmed, sweet herbs grown not for survival, but for pleasure. You've never tasted most of what they grow. You've never even seen it. But you know the names. They trickle down, whispered in kitchens or printed in books too expensive to own. Meanwhile, your garden gives what it can. A few tired carrots, a single head of wilted lettuce. Some years, nothing at all. You don't complain. Complaining won't make the ground softer or the sun warmer. You dig, you plant, you hope. And when the frost comes again and the last of the onions are gone, you return to the pottage, to the dried peas and sour cabbage, to the gray bowl on the wooden table, and you eat. Because vegetable or not, the body still needs something to chew. At night, the house is crowded. Not just with your family, but with the animals. The cow breathes slowly in the far corner, her bulk rising and falling in the dark like a hill. A pig lies near the hearth, snoring softly, its body twitching from whatever pigs dream about. The chickens rustle and peck in the rafters or beneath the bench, occasionally fluttering down in the dark with a startled thump. You've grown used to the smells: sour dung, damp wool, the sharp ammoniac sting of urine soaked into straw. The warmth they bring is worth it. When winter bites, when frost crusts the inside of the walls and your breath curls in the air like smoke, their heat is what keeps you alive. You don't have the luxury of a separate barn or a clean pen. The house is one room, maybe two if you're lucky. Everyone and everything breathes the same air. Everything and everyone shares the same floor. You wake with straw in your mouth and your back sore from the uneven pile of bedding. The blanket is heavy and damp, and your skin itches. Lice, probably, or fleas from the pig, or mites from the thatch. You scratch without thinking and pull your shirt tighter, though it's filthy from days of wear. There's no soap, not really. Maybe ash and water if someone's boiled enough to spare. But that's rare. Most of the time, you rinse your hands in cold water and wipe them on your clothes. You eat with those same hands. You feed the animals. You slaughter them too. The table is the same one where the chicken was plucked, where the dung-streaked boots were scraped, where your child sleeps during the day when the bed is too crowded. Clean is a word for noble homes, for monasteries, for people with servants. Here, clean just means less dirty than usual. The cow shifts and groans, and the smell intensifies. It's fresh, warm. You make a note to scoop it up later and toss it outside, or spread it on the field. Nothing is wasted. Even filth becomes fuel or fertilizer. But for now, you step over it as you move to stir the fire. There's dung on your soles, on your hands, probably on your food. You've long stopped worrying about it. You've never heard the word germ. You don't know about bacteria or contamination. You know that sometimes people eat and then vomit for days. You know that sometimes the baby grows pale and stops crying and then stops breathing. You know that wounds turn black, that fevers come after certain smells, that meat left too long on the table makes your stomach twist into knots. But you don't connect those things to cleanliness. You connect them to God, to fate, to punishment. Cleanliness is not protection. It's a kind of luxury, a miracle you've never witnessed. Still, you do what you can. You sweep, you scrape. You move the animals outside when the weather allows. You toss out the soiled straw and lay down new, though it won't stay fresh for long. The pig finds its way back in, the chickens keep pecking, and the cow, your greatest possession, must be guarded against cold and thieves. You feed it first some days, even before your children, because it gives milk, or it will, come spring. It is more than an animal. It is warmth. It is food. It is life. So it stays inside, breathing your air, steaming up the room with every breath. At night, you sleep beside it. At dawn, you wake to its scent. And when sickness comes, you never know who brought it in, the child, the visitor, or the cow. You don't ask. You just wrap yourself tighter in the blanket, scratch at the bites on your neck, and say your prayers. Because in this house, the animals are not guests. They are family. And you all survive together. Or not at all. The knife doesn't get washed. It gets wiped. On your apron, on your sleeve, on the corner of a cloth that's already been used to clean up spilled broth or wrap yesterday's crust. The table is the same one where the child slept last night, where the pig was gutted last week, where the cabbage was chopped this morning, and the salted fish was laid out to dry the day before that. There's no distinction between clean and dirty, raw and cooked, preparation and storage. It's all one surface. The idea that touching meat and then touching bread might be dangerous is not a thought you've ever had. The smells that linger on your hands are just part of the work. The color beneath your fingernails doesn't bother you. You've seen worse. Everyone has. You slice, you serve, you feed, you eat. The table doesn't mind. And neither, you think, should anyone else. Soap is for the wealthy. Or for monks. If you've ever seen a bar of it, it came in someone else's cart, or was made by someone with time and fat to spare. You use water, if there is any left in the bucket. Maybe ash, if the fire's been hot and clean. But mostly, you just scrub your hands with whatever's nearby. Straw, a rag, the hem of your shirt, and get on with it. Your hands touch everything. The meat, the dishes, the ladle, the child's face. You pluck lice from your scalp with the same fingers that knead dough. You wipe a nose, then stir the pot. You don't pause. There's no time. You cook because someone has to, And you eat what you cook because there is no other option. No one has ever told you how invisible things might live on surfaces. You can see dirt, and so you fear it. What you can't see doesn't exist. Not really. You've seen people get sick, of course. Often. Someone eats a piece of meat that smelled fine and ends up shivering under a blanket for 2 days. Someone drinks milk that tasted sharp and spends the night doubled over. Sometimes people die. Sometimes children go quiet and never wake up. But no one blames the food. They blame the season, the air, the will of God. Maybe the cook, if they're disliked. Maybe sin. But not the way the food was handled. Not the way the knife passed from gutting to slicing to carving without pause. Not the way blood dried on the table beneath the bread. Those connections don't exist here, not because people are foolish, but because no one ever taught them otherwise. You learn what your parents did, and they learned from theirs. The meat hangs too long? Then maybe next time you salt it better. That's all. You do not rethink the world. You just chew and try to keep it down. There are no separate rooms for cooking and eating, no sinks for rinsing, no cloths for drying clean hands. Because there are no clean hands. There are only hands, some warmer than others, some smaller, some cracked and bleeding from work, some blackened at the tips from soot or from burns. You feed with these hands. You live with them. And if they carry illness, well, then so be it. You don't have a name for the sickness that comes from under your nails or from the stale rag you used to wipe a spoon. You just know that sometimes people fall ill, and sometimes they don't get back up. You pray when that happens. You light a candle. You bury the dead. And you keep cooking on the same table, with the same hands, in the same kitchen. Because no one told you not to. Because no one ever knew. The bells ring, and you know what they mean. Not a feast. Not a gathering. Not a prayer for rain or a funeral dirge. They mean fasting, again. You press your lips together and lower your head, even as your stomach turns. The priest says it's a blessing, to cleanse the soul, to show devotion, to remind yourself that the body is temporary and the spirit eternal. But what it means in your house is no meat, no cheese, no eggs, no butter. None of the things that give you strength, none of the things you saved. The pig slaughtered in winter, off limits. The precious milk your cow gives, forbidden. The clutch of warm eggs gathered before dawn, untouched. You try not to look at them. You pretend they aren't there. But your hands remember their weight. Your body remembers their warmth. And now, for the next 40 days, you must act like you've never needed them. The fast is not gentle. It is not a quiet trimming of excess. It is complete. For the rich, it might mean meals of fish poached in almond milk, of pastries made with oil and filled with herbs. For the poor, it means gruel. It means yesterday's bread soaked in water. It means scraping the inside of the pot for traces of grease and wondering whether God will strike you down for swallowing what remains. Children cry more during fasts. They don't understand why their favorite foods vanish. You tell them stories. You promise rewards. You stretch what little you have with barley and old peas, with vinegar and brine, until it resembles food in shape but not in taste. The priest comes by sometimes, asking whether the rules are being followed. You nod. You smile. You lie. And then you ask for a blessing. Because the truth is, even if you wanted to sin, there is nothing left to sin with. You've heard whispers of dispensations, exceptions granted to the frail, to the elderly, to the wealthy. But no one in your village has ever received one. The fast is for everyone, the priest says, especially the poor, who must learn humility, as if hunger were not already your teacher, as if sacrifice were not your daily routine. You kneel in the church and listen to sermons about resisting temptation, and you think of your neighbor who buried her youngest last week. He wasted away during the last fast. His body just stopped. The priest said it was God's will, that his soul was pure. You don't argue. You don't even let yourself feel anger, because if you start, you won't stop. You hold it inside like you hold everything else. You bow your head lower and whisper the prayers you've been taught, and you try not to think about the eggs rotting in the basket by the door. Fasting is not occasional. It comes often. Before Easter, before Christmas, on Fridays, on Saints' days. It becomes a rhythm that shapes the year. You mark time not by seasons, but by what you're not allowed to eat. You plan your planting and preserving around the church calendar, knowing full well that the times when you need strength the most, before harvest, before winter, might be the very times you are ordered to go without. And when the fast finally breaks, there is no celebration, no feast, just quiet relief, a bite of cheese, a scrap of pork, a moment where food tastes like food again. But it doesn't last, because soon the bells will ring again. The priest will raise his hand, and the hunger will return, not as punishment, not as misfortune, but as holiness. And you will obey, not because you want to, but because you must. Because hunger in this life is not just natural, it is sacred. The stench hits you before you reach the stalls, a mix of sour fruit, damp straw, old fish, and something you can't name, something warm and rancid and thick in the air. You pull your shawl over your mouth, but it doesn't help. The smell lives in your nose now. You step between puddles, slippery with spilled ale and animal waste, and try not to lose your footing. The market is alive, in the worst way. Voices shout over each other, vendors calling prices, customers arguing, children crying. Somewhere, a chicken escapes its crate and flutters past your ankles. The meat stall has a crowd, as always, because it's payday and someone might have a coin to spare. You edge closer and look. The beef is turning gray. The ribs are fly-blown. One leg of lamb is so slimy it glistens. The butcher waves a hand at the flies like it's nothing. You nod. You've bought worse. Produce isn't better. You see apples with bruises so deep they split open, carrots soft at the tips, and onions sprouting green from both ends. Still, it's more than you have at home. You poke at a cabbage that's half black and ask the price. Too high. Everything's too high. You haggle, not because you're clever, but because you're desperate. The vendor shrugs. He doesn't care. There's always someone poorer behind you who'll take it for more. You step back and move to the fish stall. The herring reeks. The cod is stiff. There's something in a bucket that might have been eel. You ask how long it's been there. He tells you it's fresh from 2 days ago. You don't argue. You buy it. Because you have to. Because the children will eat anything if you soak it long enough in vinegar and pretend it's stew. The bread sellers are luckier. Their wares look clean, even when they're not. But you know their tricks. You've seen chalk mixed into the flour to stretch it further. You've bitten into loaves so dry they crumble like sand. You've watched your neighbor pull a splinter from his gums after chewing a crust full of husks. But still, bread is safer than meat, safer than fruit. You buy 2 loaves and hope they're heavy with grain and not with stones. A rat darts past your foot and disappears beneath a stall. No one notices, or if they do, they don't care. Rats are part of the market now, like the shouting and the mud and the smell. One vendor is selling pies. They're cheap, suspiciously cheap. You ask what's inside. He tells you meat. You don't ask from what. You buy one. It's warm at least. It fills your hand like something generous. You take a bite and don't chew too carefully. By midday, the market is chaos. Spilled baskets, cracked eggs, blood on the cobbles. Someone's goat is bleeding near the edge of the square. And a boy is collecting the runoff in a chipped bowl. For soup, maybe. Or for a stew. You turn away. You've seen worse. Everyone has. This is the best chance you'll have all week to buy anything worth eating. And still, you return home with little more than a sack of scraps, your shoes soaked in filth, your coin pouch empty. The food is not good. It is not clean. But it is food. And in this life, that's enough. Tomorrow you'll pick out the bugs, cut away the mold, soak the meat, and boil it all into something your family can swallow. You won't tell them what you saw at the market, just that you were lucky to find anything at all. The table is long, crowded with silver dishes and golden goblets, platters stacked with roasted birds, glazed meats, and custards quivering under spiced dustings. The room is hot, not from the hearth alone, but from the press of bodies, the weight of velvet and fur, the flicker of torches against stone. Laughter echoes off the walls as goblets are raised, and servants hustle to refill cups and present new courses. The feast is endless, a show of power and prosperity, a declaration. Here no one goes hungry, not like the peasants scratching for turnips, not like the barefoot child begging outside the gate. But beneath the extravagance lies a quiet, ever-present danger, one no wealth or prayer can stop. The meat has been sitting too long. The cream curdled hours ago. The fish was carried from too far, too slow. The spices mask much, but not everything. And once the stomach turns, not even gold can save them. They eat with abandon. Peacocks stuffed with smaller birds. Boars roasted whole, their mouths stuffed with apples, and their bellies filled with herbs. The sauces are thick with clove and cinnamon, masking any hint of decay. Wine flows to wash it all down, heady and warm and distracting. No one questions the goose that tastes slightly sour, or the venison with a strange texture. To refuse would be rude. To question would be an insult. Everyone smiles. Everyone chews. Even when the flavors twist and something bitter curls behind the sweetness, they keep eating. It's part of the performance. To eat richly is to live richly, to rule, to dominate. And so the feast continues, with second helpings and third, until belts loosen and eyes grow glassy. Somewhere in the shadows, the cook watches with tight lips. He knows how long the stew sat cooling. He knows where the rabbit came from and how many days passed since it was caught. Later, the pain begins, sometimes that night, sometimes the next morning. A noble wakes with sweat on their brow, a tightness in their gut, a trembling in their limbs. Physicians are called. Leeches are summoned. Cold cloths are laid across fevered foreheads. They whisper of bad air, of humors misaligned, of a curse or perhaps punishment for sin. No one speaks of the lamb that reeked before it was cooked. No one mentions the milk that was left out beside the fire. And even if they did, what could be done? The damage is already inside. The stomach churns. The bowels loosen. The mind drifts. Sometimes they recover, pale and shaken. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes a feast ends with a funeral. And yet, the next week, another table is set. Another bird roasted. Another glass raised. Because the danger is invisible, and the hunger for power, for beauty, for spectacle, it's louder than caution. Death in a noble bed doesn't look like peasant death. It comes with whispers and candlelight, with hands clasped in prayer and servants pacing the hall. But it's the same death, from the same spoiled food, from the same ignorance. Their plates were gilded, but the rot still crept in. Their cooks wore fine tunics, but they still stirred pots with the same hoys that gutted pheasants and swept ash from the hearth. No one truly understood how food could kill. They only knew it sometimes did. And still, they dined. Because to feast was to show strength. To deny a dish was to insult the host. So they swallowed and smiled, even as their stomachs warned otherwise. And when the pain came, they called for priests, not answers. Because in the medieval world, food was not just nourishment. It was theater. It was politics. It was faith. And faith, as it turns out, was no match for a bad oyster. The morning has barely begun when she lifts the lid. Steam doesn't rise. The wort inside the pot is weak, thin as broth, pale as straw. Not the rich, foamy drink it ought to be. She knows it. She tastes it. It's not ready, not hearty, not satisfying. But the grain is gone. The mash used up. There's nothing left at taiptsom to make it stronger. And so she adds water. Again. It dilutes what little flavor remains, dulls the bitterness, thins the body. But it stretches the batch. That's what matters. People don't come for the taste. They come because it's not water. Because they trust her pot more than the village well. Because even weak ale is safer than the stream that runs past the dung heap and the tannery. She stirs slowly and prays the villagers won't notice, or if they do, that they'll be too thirsty to care. She's been brewing for years. Her hands know the heat, the grain, the boil. Her eyes know when the foam rises just enough to threaten the edge. She used to make strong ale, thick and malty, enough to warm a man through to his bones. But times have changed. Grain is more expensive. The harvest came short. Her children need bread more than the neighbors need pleasure. So she brews small. Barely enough malt to darken the liquid. Barely enough hops to preserve it. Still, she smiles when she serves it. Wipes the mugs with the same cloth she uses for the floor. Fills them half, then tops them with froth. She keeps a brave face. The men grumble, but they drink. The women gossip, but they return. Because no one else is boiling water all day, straining the liquid, pouring it into casks, and blessing it with rosemary or mugwort. No one else dares risk the cost. Sometimes she cheats, not out of greed, but necessity. A pinch of flour to thicken the brew, a scrap of old bread to start fermentation faster, a leaf or root to mask the sour. She remembers her mother doing the same. It's not trickery, it's survival. If the ale goes bad, it's not just wasted, it's dangerous. It can sicken the children, anger the buyers, bring shame on her name. So she does what she must, quietly, carefully. She watches for signs, the mold at the edge, the scent that's off by a breath, the bubbling that starts too soon. And when something turns, she dumps it. It breaks her heart. But better that than serving poison. Still, the loss bites. Every spoiled jug is a meal gone, a shoe not mended, a day's work drowned. So she waters it again and again, until the line between ale and water is so thin it barely matters. The villagers whisper, of course. They say her brew's gone soft, that she's lazy or stingy or cursed, that her ale used to be strong enough to blind a man, and now it barely warms his belly. She hears them, but she keeps stirring, keeps smiling, because she knows what they don't, that every mug she pours keeps a child from fever, that every drop, however weak, is one less chance to die from tainted well water, that her watered-down ale has kept more people alive than the church's prayers or the physician's potions. She is not proud of the taste. She is not proud of the lie. But she is proud of the work. She is the alewife, the quiet guardian of the village's thirst. And even if no one thanks her, even if they spit her name, they still come, still drink, still live. And that, for her, is enough. You approach the stone wall with your head low and your stomach tight. The monastery rises like a fortress from the hills, quiet and cold, with narrow windows and thick doors that only open for bells or blessings. You've been here before, not often. Only when things are worst, and things are always worse now. You stand among others, women clutching thin children, men with cracked hands. The elderly bent and whispering prayers, you wait for the sound. A creak, a hinge, a footstep. When the door opens, no one speaks. A young monk steps out with a basket, his robe patched, his eyes lowered. He doesn't look at you. He sets the basket on the stone and walks back inside. It's filled with crusts, some blackened, some soft with rot. A ladle of something cold and pale sloshes in a clay bowl. No meat, no warmth. But it's something, and that makes it a gift. Inside those walls, the monks eat differently. You've heard stories. Porridge with honey, butter on warm bread, even cheese sometimes. Dried fruits, lentils, herbs from the garden. Their lives are strict, yes, but not starved. They rise early, they pray often, and they eat better than anyone for miles. Not like kings, but certainly like men who never miss a meal. The rules of their order forbid extravagance, but not nourishment. They tend their gardens with care, bake in wide ovens, store root vegetables in cellars that stay cool through summer. Their hands are soft, their fingers clean. They share little of it. What they give to the poor are remnants, scraps from the platters that never reached empty, bits of crust trimmed from loaves too fine to share whole. Still, you're grateful. Even cold stew is better than no stew. Even bitter bread is better than none. You take your portion and move away from the gate. There's no place to sit, so you crouch near the road. The others do the same. No one talks. Chewing is loud in silence. The food is dry. You dip the crust in the stew, hoping it softens. It doesn't. A child nearby starts coughing, and his mother pulls him close, offering her own piece. You look at your bowl, at the way the broth clings to the sides, at the sliver of root vegetable floating near the bottom, and you feel lucky. This is the best food you've had in days. You finish it all. Wipe the bowl with your fingers, lick them clean. Then you place the bowl beside the wall and walk away. You never ask for more. No one does. The monks won't give it. And you won't shame yourself by begging from men who already believe they've done enough. There are rumors, of course, that behind the walls there's wine in the cellar, sausages in the smokehouse, wheels of cheese stacked like coin, that monks feast on saints' days, roast birds in winter, and eat fresh apples in fall. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not. It doesn't matter. What matters is the basket. What matters is that they open the door at all. You don't resent them. Not exactly. You envy them, perhaps. But you understand the rules are not theirs alone. The church feeds who it chooses, and the church has chosen you only in part. So you walk back to your hovel fuller than before, still hungry, always hungry, but not empty. You think about the monks, about the warmth of their kitchen, about the smell of baking bread you once caught on the wind. You don't hate them. You thank them, even for crumbs. Because in your world, crumbs are kindness. The first snow doesn't scare you. It's the third, the fourth, the endless gray that follows. That's when the cold doesn't feel like weather anymore. It feels like a condition, a sentence. The sun becomes a stranger, low and pale when it appears, offering no warmth and vanishing too quickly. Inside, the fire burns low because the wood pile's shrinking. Everyone's wearing every piece of clothing they own, and still, their toes ache. But more than the cold, it's the hunger that wears you down. Not the sharp kind that growls after a missed meal, but the dull, constant ache of not enough. The pottage boils again, thinner than before. Water with roots, water with memory. There used to be beans, there used to be barley. Now it's mostly hope. You eat it anyway. Slowly, as if dragging out the moment might fill the stomach more. You count the jars again, not because you forgot the number, but because looking at them feels like control. 4 of dried peas, 2 of lentils, 1 with something you're not even sure of, shriveled berries or maybe stones. The onions are soft, the garlic's sprouting. The cheese is gone. The salted meat, if you ever had it, is just a smear of memory on the cloth it was wrapped in. You slice off the mold from the bread and eat what's left, pretending not to notice the taste. You tell the children it's fine. They believe you less each day. One cries in the night from hunger, but you pretend it was a dream. You whisper stories to them about feasts, about warm kitchens and buttery stews, and you pray they can't hear the lie in your voice. Work doesn't stop in winter. The animals still need care. The thatch still needs patching, but your body moves slower. Your hands don't grip tools the same when they're raw and red. You gather sticks for kindling. You pull frozen beets from the ground with bare fingers. Your breath clouds around your face, and you catch yourself watching it, as if it's the only thing you still have to give. Every morning feels heavier. Every task takes longer. Even walking becomes deliberate, because falling means wet clothes, and wet clothes mean sickness. And sickness in winter is a death sentence no one can afford. So you move carefully, eat slowly, think constantly of food. When the church bell rings, you hope it's a feast day, but it's usually a fast. Some say spring is hope, that after winter comes life again. But in truth, the weeks before the thaw are the hardest of all. The food is lowest. The stomachs are weakest. The animals are thin. The days are still short. And you've already burned the good wood. There's nothing left but damp branches and smoke that stings the eyes. You stop counting days. You start counting bites. The children stop asking for more. Even the rats seem slower, as if they, too, are starving. You thank God for every scrap, even as you curse Him under your breath. But you don't stop moving. You don't stop boiling the pot, even if it's just for warm water. You don't stop sitting close together at night, sharing breath, holding hands, pretending the worst is already behind you. Because winter may take your strength, but it won't take your will. Not yet. It begins with the rain, or the lack of it, or too much of it, falling in the wrong month, for the wrong number of days. You can never predict it, only pray that the skies are kind. But this year, the clouds were cruel. The wheat never ripened. The barley drowned in the field. The turnips rotted before they could be pulled. You saw it early, how the green faded too soon, how the stalks bent and fell. There were no second chances, no other plots to lean on. What was lost stayed lost. And as the season ended, the fear set in. Quiet first, then loud. The village held its breath, counted its sacks, and knew this would not be hunger, this would be famine. By winter, the stores were already empty. The pottage became water flavored with memory. You scraped lichen from stones, peeled bark from trees, ground acorns into powder, and called it flour. The bread it made could crack a tooth. People boiled nettles, chewed grass, fought over bitter roots that made the stomach cramp. Children cried in tones that didn't sound human. Some stopped crying altogether. Your body changed, grew light in all the wrong places, hands like claws, eyes too wide. You saw neighbors pulling at weeds in the road, their faces dull, their movements slow. One woman died with green smeared across her mouth. They said she ate something she shouldn't have. No one knew what it was. No one asked. Hunger blurred the rules, and then came the disappearances. A boy first. Young, small, quiet. His mother said he went into the woods. Some believed her, some didn't. Then an old man vanished, then a girl. Too many to be chance. Whispers spread about meat that didn't taste like lamb, about stews cooked behind shuttered windows. No one accused anyone outright, but doors stayed locked, eyes stayed down. People stopped sharing. The church said to pray harder, that famine was a test, a punishment, a cleansing. But prayer didn't fill bowls, and no one ever saw a priest go hungry. The monks behind their walls still baked bread, still rang bells, still offered crumbs. You took what they gave and said thank you, but inside you cursed them too. When spring finally came, it brought no joy. The ground was dry, the seeds were few, the bodies planting them were weak. You worked because there was no other option. You dug with blistered hands and hoped the rain would come in just the right water this time. You didn't talk about the people who didn't survive Tamav. There were too many. Some graves had names, most didn't. You had lost the habit of smiling, of feeling full. Even when the harvests returned, something stayed broken. The fear lingered. You salted everything. hid food, ate fast, even when you didn't need to. Because famine wasn't just a season. It was a memory carved into the bone. And once it had touched you, it never truly left. You saw it yourself, bare feet in the mud, hands tied behind the back, eyes fixed on the earth as the bailiff read the sentence. A loaf of rye, hard and small, taken from the Lord's storehouse. Not hidden, not hoarded, just held for a moment too long. The man said he hadn't eaten in days, that his children were crying, that he meant to pay, to trade labor, anything. It didn't matter. The Lord had made it clear. The grain is his, the bread is his, and so is the right to punish. The whip cracked once, twice, 10 times, each blow echoing across the village square. You didn't watch the whole thing. You couldn't. But the sound followed you home. Hunger is cruel, but justice in these lands is colder still. Laws guard food more fiercely than they guard people. A rabbit in the woods belongs to the crown. A fish in the stream belongs to the manor. An apple that falls from a tree is not yours unless the tree is. The poor learn this early, often through pain. Children have lost fingers for gathering eggs. Men have lost lives for setting snares. Women have vanished after being caught gleaning one too many ears of wheat. The gallows are not for murderers alone. They are for the hungry who dared reach. They say poachers are thieves, criminals. But everyone knows the truth. Most of them were just trying to eat. A rabbit wasn't a luxury. It was survival. And the punishment for survival was death. Still, the risk is tempting. When your belly is empty, laws become noise. You move at night. You listen for dogs. You wait for the guards to pass. You pray the trap is enough, that the snare is strong, that the scent was right. Sometimes you catch something. A bird, a hare, even a thin fox. You cook it quick, in the dark, bones and all. You eat before the sun comes up. You hide the feathers, bury the bones, clean the blood with cold water and silence. But if they catch you, if someone sees, there's no forgiveness, no appeal. You'll be dragged to the square like all the others. Your hunger won't matter. Your tears won't matter. Only the crime. Only the example. It's worse in lean years. When the harvest fails, the laws grow sharper. The lords fear unrest. The clergy warn of sin. The guards walk more often. The gallows see more guests. You hear of entire families arrested for stealing a bag of barley, of boys beaten for picking berries on the wrong land, of mothers jailed with infants for begging near the church steps. And yet, you understand it all too well, because the system was built not to feed, but to keep order, not to nourish, but to remind. Food is power, and in the medieval world, power is never free. It is hoarded, guarded, punished for being touched, so you go without. You chew boiled bark. You trade favors for scraps. You dream of bread but don't dare reach for it, because here hunger might kill you, but stealing will do it faster. He wakes before the others, before the bell, before the light, before the lords even stir in their feathered beds. The kitchen is cold when he enters, though the fire's still glowing faint from last night's feast. Bones in the ash, grease on the stones, bread crusts trampled underfoot by boots that don't clean themselves. He sweeps without a word, not out of duty, but out of habit. Then he begins again, kneading, chopping, boiling. It never ends. Because in the castle there is always someone hungry, even if they just finished eating. The lords demand variety. The ladies want delicacy. The children refuse yesterday's stew, and so the cook works day and night, serving people who never taste the same thing twice. While he, behind the pots, tastes only steam and silence. He sees the waste first. Entire platters of roast swan untouched. Cakes carved into only for the garnish. Bowls of fruit left to rot because the grapes were slightly bruised. He used to save what he could. Slip scraps to the lower servants. Sneak bones to the kennels. Stash wilted greens behind the shed. But someone noticed. Said it was theft. Said it smelled like disloyalty. So now he watches food go from spit to plate to gutter. A goose fattened for months, boiled in wine, then tossed aside because it was too rich. A pie filled with raisins and pork, left out overnight, then discarded because it had cooled. He says nothing. He scrubs the pans. He boils again. He pretends not to see the rats feasting better than most peasants do. But the food here, despite its richness, carries risk. Too much, too fast, too raw. He's seen it. A maid coughing blood after sampling a bird pink at the bone. A stable hand shaking after drinking milk gone sour in the sun. A page turning gray after eating oysters brought up from the coast too late, too warm. He's heard whispers of poison too, slow and sweet, tucked beneath layers of fig and honey. Not meant for servants, but killing them all the same. And when they die, no one stops the feast. No one pauses. The table is simply reset. The room aired out. The name forgotten. The cook knows too much. Not because he's clever, but because he's always there. Always listening. Always sweating beside the flames. Hearing the gossip that floats in with the perfume. He could leave. He's thought of it. Go back to the village. Work a field. Dig a ditch. Eat simply. Die plainly. But something holds him. Not pride. Not loyalty. Just inertia. The weight of routine. The strange comfort of knowing that, in this kitchen at least, he's important. He matters. If he stops cooking, the whole house complains. If he speaks, people listen, even if they laugh. He has power, though not the kind that buys meat or rest. So he stays, and he watches. Watches waste and illness and luxury rot from the inside. Watches plates piled high for people who never chew slowly. Watches his hands wrinkle from hot water. His knees ache from stone floors. His back bend like the ladle he stirs with. He knows too much. But he keeps cooking, because someone must. Because hunger in all its forms always returns, even to the castle, especially there. You sit at your table. Maybe it's a small one. Maybe the room is quiet. You look down at your plate. Something warm, something chosen. You picked this meal. You didn't wait in a line. You didn't trade a favor or a prayer or a day's labor just to earn it. You didn't dig it from the earth or chase it through a forest. You didn't beg for it behind a monastery door or steal it from a field and run. You don't glance at the doorway expecting someone to burst in and accuse you of theft. You don't watch the pot boil and wonder if it's enough to share with 5 other mouths. You don't ration bites. You don't pretend water counts as soup. You just eat. Because it's dinner. Because it's Tuesday. Because you're allowed. Maybe you light a candle. Maybe you don't need to. Maybe the lights hum quietly above you, never flickering, never running out. You take a drink, water. Cold, clean, silent. It doesn't taste like iron or ash. You didn't carry it for miles. You didn't boil it to kill what might be living inside. You didn't share it with livestock. You don't sip it slowly, wondering when you'll next refill the bucket. It's just there, from a tap, a bottle, a glass. A miracle so constant it stops feeling like one. And the food? It's not a root you pulled with your fingers. Not a bone you gnawed clean and hid from the landlord. It's not dried fish from 2 winters ago, soaked in brine and regret. It's not yesterday's crust, nor someone else's leftovers. It's yours, chosen, hot, and enough. There's no feast music playing, no roaring hearth, no goblets or gold. But even the quietest meal now would have been unthinkable then. You don't need to wonder if a moldy loaf will make you sick. You don't need to eat around maggots. You don't need to chew in silence while others watch, waiting their turn. You don't need to fast because the church demanded it, or because the forest was empty, or because the weather cursed the fields. You've never eaten bark. You've never pretended weeds were salad. You've never gone to bed dizzy and hoped to wake up full. Most nights, you eat and move on. But not tonight. Tonight, you think about it. You remember, not from memory, but from knowing how easily this could not have been. So you breathe, you chew, you swallow, and for just a moment, you feel the weight of time, of how many lived with less, of how fragile comfort really is. You don't need to feel guilty, just aware. The meal in front of you isn't just food. It's history reversed. It's suffering escaped. It's a quiet victory over centuries of hunger and fear. You don't need a feast to feel full. Just this. Just now. Just the knowledge that you didn't have to fight for it. That you could choose it. That, if nothing else, you get to decide what's on your plate. And in this world, that's everything.